At the crossroads of Asia, Africa, and Europe can be found the birthplace of the first monotheistic religion, Judaism. Here in Jerusalem, on Mount Moriah, the Jewish people build and then rebuild their temple, believing that on earth, this is the place closest to God.
There is no archaeological remains from the first temple, so we have to rely on the historical sources.
Orit Peleg-Barkat has a doctorate in archaeology. Her research is on the temples of Jerusalem.
So most of the details that we have come from the Bible. And there we have quite a vague description, but with some details about the plan and the measurements of the temple.
According to the Hebrew Bible in ancient times, Jewish pilgrims had to venture 3 times a year to the Temple of Solomon to pray and offer animals for sacrifice to their God. Entering, they traversed immense courtyards, then offered their animals for sacrifice to the high priests, the Kohanim, since only they could perform this daily ritual on the sacrificial altar. The Kohanim were also in charge of lighting the large menorah. These candelabras reminded the pilgrims that they were entering the most sacred site in the temple, the Holy of Holies, which held the Holy Ark, containing the 10 Commandments given by God to Moses and his people on Mount Sinai. God also entrusted Moses with the Torah, containing all of his commandments, as well as the history of the Jews from its beginning. The Torah corresponds to the Old Testament. Since antiquity, Jews have gathered in synagogues to pray and study the Word of God. In synagogues, the Holy of Holies is represented by the Ark, where the Torah is carefully stored. And the sacrificial altar is symbolized by a lectern, where the sacred scrolls are read.
As a matter of fact, sacred for us is never architecture. There is one place which is sacred, and God defines it with no architectural measures.
Rachel Elior is a professor of philosophy at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Her research interests concentrate on the history of Jewish thought, and in particular, Jewish mysticism.
There is no divine description on the nature of the temple, architecturally wise. It's only a place which is commemorated and sanctified by the very presence of God. That's the nature of the temple.
Following the turbulent history of the Jewish people, there remains today only one visible remnant from ancient times, the Kotel, wall in Hebrew. Judaism is a religion which is not fixated on images, statues, or objects, but rather is rooted in the power of memory, ideas, and words.
The sacredness is in the community. So the sanctity is not about a building. It's about the memory, about the ritual, about the text, about the teaching, and about the ongoing engagement of study and creativity.
A synagogue can be huge and richly decorated, as well as small and intimate. The word synagogue has its origins from the Greek, meaning gather, assemble. In Hebrew, they are called Bet Knesset, house of meetings, Bet Tefillah, house of prayers, and also Bet Midrash, house of teaching.
A synagogue could be in any place. It could be in a room, it could be in a house, it could be in a tent. Any place that these people are sitting together and studying could be a synagogue. The only requirement for a synagogue is the presence of the divine law.
Since 1967, there is a divided space reserved for women and for men on the western wall of the temple, the Kotel. This obligatory separation was not always apparent in the temple, but today it exists in many synagogues.
There were no part for the women in the synagogue. Only later, synagogue with places for women would be added. There is a debate among scholars if in ancient synagogues there would have been a place for women, but there is a debate and there is no one opinion about it.
Women and men pray in front of the Kotel, which is also called the Wailing Wall, in memory of the painful past of the temples of Jerusalem.
The Solomon's temple was destroyed by the Babylonians in the 6th century BCE. And then a few decades after that, the Jews came back from Babylon and reestablished the temple.
In 20 BC, Herod, king of Judea, who is placed upon the throne a few years earlier by the Romans, oversees the rebuilding of the temple. His ambition? To create the largest, most beautiful building in all the world. It will take him nearly half a century to complete this gigantic project, resulting in the largest edifice built of its time. The Jewish community of Jerusalem was never able to properly worship in this sacred place. Very shortly after completing the building work, the first conflict between Romans and rebellious Jews erupts.
So in the year 70, the Roman soldiers managed to get inside the Temple Mount, where the rebels entrenched themselves. And in this war between the rebels and the soldiers, the temple caught fire.
Following the destruction of Herod's temple, Jews no longer have a sacred place to make their pilgrimages, nor an altar to offer sacrifices to their God. This condition of exile amplifies the Jewish diaspora now spreading throughout the world.